Good afternoon, friends, colleagues. Thank you very much for joining our discussion. We're going to speak today about the role of critical informational infrastructure and the threats that are typical for this infrastructure in our time. We're also going to touch upon the ways of remediating those threats. We probably shouldn't really delve into the details of how relevant this topic is. We all know that critical infrastructure and attacks on critical infrastructure can have very grave and serious implications. We all remember the Stuxnet case from 2008, when plants in Iran were disrupted. We remember cases in transport infrastructure, where there was a collapse of 6 airports and 125 airway companies could not provide services to their customers. There are also cases where threats resulted in economic or social problems. The scale of threats is increasingly greater year after year. According to various reports, we witness billions of attacks in our country. The nature of threats is also transforming, along with the economic nature of threats. The New York Times has recently said that it is getting increasingly more political, and there are countries that want to attack the critical infrastructure of other countries. We are joined today by professionals, and we're going to discuss the threats to critical infrastructure. But first, let me introduce my colleagues who are going to be the participants of our meeting. Yusuf Al-Ulian, Vice President for Information Technology, Saudi Aramco. Andrei Vashka, National Computer Incident Coordination Center. Igor Lepunov, Vice President, Information Security, Rostelecom. Lothar Renner, Managing Director for Cybersecurity, EMEA, Cisco. And Igor Milashevsky, CEO, GLONASS. Let me start with a very short Q&A session. My question will be to all the participants of the panel. Could you please talk about your perspective onto how the scale of threats in your industry has changed in the last couple of years? Let's start with the first industry. Yusuf, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd just like to start by being pleased to be part of this session and also part of this very important event. And I must say that despite its second year, it became very attractive for cybersecurity community to take part. We've seen last year more than 680 organizations from 50 countries have took place, and this morning we saw record numbers as well. So special thanks for the organizer for inviting me and for a well-organized event. Now, for the questions at hand, I just have to make a clarification. I'm not hands-on, so I'll give you my perspective from managing IT cybersecurity within our organization. If we go back to a few years back, the type of threat were basics. It was immature. And as we live through the years, we've seen a couple of changes that drastically made the game of cybersecurity defense completely different. One is the fact that we have seen technologies being used on the bad side of the equation. I mean, artificial intelligence, and this morning we've heard about machine-to-machine data exchange, and so that's one angle. The other angle is we've seen the adversaries are getting probably tired from hitting on the main objective or the main target. So what we've seen is a shift to the third party, meaning the partners and the subcontractors and the vendors who deal with their targets. And it's not only the first layer, but many, many layers that they are trying to. So this is probably the two shift from, again, from a high-level perspective, and then maybe my colleagues will shed some lights on more technical, but I think this is very important for us to watch the behavior of the cyber crime and where it's going.
Спасибо большое, Юзеф. Поменялась типология.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. So the typology has changed. The nature of threats has changed. Mr. Ivashko, could you briefly, in just a couple of minutes, speak about how the scale has changed in the last couple of years? Thank you. Good afternoon, Yevgeny. Just a quick correction. When you said billions of computer attacks on the infrastructure of Russia, that's not exactly true. Dozens of billions computer computer interactions and computer targeting, but not exactly attacks per se. To be more specific about the more dangerous implications, I would say there are about 100,000 of such incidents, of such complex attacks. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've witnessed a 10% growth, roughly 10% growth, in such attacks on the infrastructure of Russia. Speaking of significant differences, significant changes, we can say that recently we have recorded an increase in upscale in such complex attacks due to changes in platforms with hidden systems of control. There is a control center that has a multi-layer distributed system, and that is the trend that we've seen in the last years. Such platforms can be dangerous both for the critical infrastructure and also for any infrastructure of any significance, because they can be used at any moment, they can be activated at any time to perform a swift operation in any area. Thank you, Mr. Ivashka. Igor, Mr. Lepunov, what is your opinion? Good afternoon, colleagues. What we've seen in the last year, and here I'd like to support my colleagues, what we've seen in the last year is that the number of attacks that are targeting critical information infrastructure has grown. What we see in our monitoring center that provides security services, monitoring and response services for critical infrastructure, and what we've seen with the infrastructure that we are protecting, that we're providing defense for, it pertains a lot to such industries as oil, energy, oil companies. The density of attacks onto critical infrastructure has grown. According to our data, a bit less than 14% of attacks are attacks onto critical infrastructure. But if we speak about the scale in the last 2 years, the number of attacks has grown dramatically. The attacks on critical informational infrastructure, and this really gets you thinking. Last year, the attack that used the vulnerabilities in network equipment, we saw them in the financial sphere, in the lending sphere, in the critical information infrastructure. The density of attacks was 10 to 15 times greater than on other types of infrastructure. The focus of attention from cybercriminals is the focus of attention of cybercriminals is shifting toward critical infrastructure. Thank you very much, Mr. Milashevsky. What's going on with GLONASS? Has GLONASS encountered any issues in the last years related to computer incidents? And maybe a couple of words on transport. Let me start with a basic idea. The boundaries of critical informational infrastructure and all the other things is not only in vertical segmentation, in coinciding with the boundaries between industries, but it's rather vertical. I'm talking about the scale of implications. Take social services that don't have financial implications. If they are disrupted, it is already critical. GLONASS is a network operator. I'm sorry, Igor. It's a very short Q&A session. In just a couple of minutes, how has the scale of threats changed in the last 2 years? Is there has it increased? We see that traditional, regular incidents have increased in scale, and we've been expanding the defense perimeter of our systems, and we've witnessed new. And here I wanted to say a couple of words on what makes us stand out as an operator. 4 million subscribers as of today, and the number is growing. No individuals, cars. We gather information, and we use this information to improve our response to incidents, to accidents, and to failures and disruptions in those systems. So you think the scale has increased? Yes, correct. Mr. Renner, what can you say about informational trends?
Maybe it's important to understand what happened over the last years. So if you look 10 years back, the threat landscape was very centralized on a single data center with a single access to the internet. We talked about digitization. Today we have more than 5 billion connected devices worldwide. So that threat landscape has increased significantly. What we still see is that the number one attack vector to attack any kind of infrastructure goes through email. And what we've seen that many of the attacks through emails is to steal the login credentials of users. So that is the way normally how you enter into an infrastructure and then either position malware or anything else. So, and that has still kept the same independently from the increase of the threats.
Спасибо большое, коллеги.
Thank you, colleagues. So as we see, the topic is relevant. The scale of threats is growing. The nature of threats is changing. We will then next speak about specific areas, specific industries. Let's start with oil, then transport. We'll talk about the situation in those industries, the risks in those industries, and how our colleagues respond to such risks and threats. Yusuf, could you start with Saudi Aramco, the leading oil producer in the world? Apparently, you apply innovative, cutting-edge technology, to a large extent information technology. Clearly, in terms of the issues of information security are very important for you, and clearly you have various risks and threats that are specific for your industry, for your company. How do you deal with them? How do you mitigate them? Could you please share your perspective?
Okay, first of all, when we talk about Saudi Aramco, it's not about oil and gas. It's an enterprise that we provide services for our customer, from aviation to transportation, community services, oil and gas, and so on and so forth. So when we look at our cybersecurity strategy, we have to keep all of this in mind. When we talk about vectors, cybersecurity vector, we mention email as the most vital one. Insider threat is another, and the impact of the critical infrastructure is completely different. The vector, or the cybersecurity vector, on the standard, unique, and common computing environment is easier to detect than if it is targeting critical infrastructure. Why? For two reasons. The first one is the technology that we have deployed in the common computing network infrastructures is up to speed in terms of adapting and adhering to cybersecurity protocol. However, if we look on the other side, on the critical infrastructure, we've seen control systems that have been deployed in the industry over the last 2 decades. And control systems are not upgraded or replaced as easily as computing and switches and what have you. So what we end up with now, so far, is an outdated control system that's not designed with cybersecurity in mind. We've heard this morning, for example, both of the distinguished speakers have touched base on this one, calling for designing or producing with security in mind. So to detect today potential hazards in your control system is difficult. Application monitoring is not there. Patching for your control system is close to impossible. Why? Because the operating systems that are around your control system is not up to date. To do a patch, probably you have to disrupt your operation, shutting down your plants. So that's of the past, and to today to a certain extent. Now, moving forward, imagine with deploying IR4 technology, as we have seen it. I've seen it's going in a fast pace in control systems and critical infrastructure. This will increase the landscape of the cybersecurity risk service exponentially. Therefore, I think we have an opportunity in the cybersecurity community to work with our vendors, mainly the control system vendors, to expedite replacing the aging control system, and when they put the new one, is to really keep cybersecurity in mind when they design their system. So that's one. The other area of concerns for us is the growing interdependently between your operations and the rest of the world. The world is really interconnected now. Putting also the IR4 and the sensors, and will increase the number of partners that you have to deal with. Protecting your home is not enough if you have interconnected with other homes who are not protected. The cybersecurity weaknesses is where the weakness link is. Today, we see a growing challenge in managing this third-party complex situation. If I put it in a simple terms, it's like layers. And you take an onion and you peel the onion, you protect the inner circle of your onion, only to find out the second layer needs to be protected. and guess what? The third layer, and so on, so I call it the nth layer. Now combine this with opening into the cloud-based solutions. Today, probably 80%, if not 90% of the IR Force solution that will go into your plants or your critical infrastructure will come from the cloud. And I don't think it's, or it is easy to say, it's that you don't know where your data is, and you don't know where your critical data is when you get to the cloud. So that's a challenge that I think we have to face, but I believe that with collaboration between the infrastructure operators and the vendors, as well as the partner, will help us to mitigate this risk. Remember that it's a win-win situation, because the vendors, when they protect themselves and they work with their customers to make sure that they are not impacted, their market share will be maintained, as far as customers will maintain their operation as well.
Thank you very much. I guess that the most important trend in the nearest future for you is to build up cooperation with your partners who are going together with you, processing data, will look for cyber threats, patch holes, and that is your key strategy when working to modernize your production, your manufacture cycle, removing old patches and creating new solutions. And this is like a strategy vector. Thank you very much. Let us go to GLONASS and Mr. Milashevsky. You have already introduced your organization. It works with a lot of transport vehicles, and maybe you could specify what kinds of threats you encounter and how you manage them in GLONASS or in general in transport industry, maybe shedding lights on some issues that might be interesting for our colleagues. Thank you. So I started talking about operator, or unique operator. Creating it was the result of international requirements that are built into the vehicle construction. But it turned out there were more ways to apply this system. It's monitoring passenger transportation, hazard waste transportation, insurance. And apart from traditional threats and hazards for the resource that is already there in the network. There are threats that have to do with the way devices function, moving devices, what is more important. Their number is growing exponentially, and it will grow bigger than the scale of the network and the number of people. And they're working autonomously without an operator. There are hours of autonomous work, which brings us to a necessity to create mechanisms in the network that would allow for creation of a different network. I'm talking about IoT. If in general Internet 1, the functionality of the network was limited by so-called silly devices. In the IoT, it is a spiral development. You need to create clever, smart networks. You need to create a platform that will be able to manage the risks that arise due to the huge number of devices, especially moving devices, moving vehicles and things. And we are working to create a special environment to protect information that is transferred, specific information that is transferred, and specific security for them. Here we are talking about neutrality, technological neutrality, and trust. For example, for the IoT, for the Internet of Things, we need to talk about manifests that declare an algorithm and and the rules of network interaction of these things to be able to harmonize, to balance their work within a network. Creating a CDN that should be very well distributed. You can't have exchange of information through Moscow to open a garage in Vladivostok. Intellectual transport systems. This topic is relevant not only for transport. It's important for telecom. Well, this is what we're doing, what our organization is doing. We also see the need to coordinate with the state center or public center that is meant to mitigate the scale of disruption and failure. So basic things. Yeah, I think I've listed them all. Well, Igor said that a lot in transport now depends on telecom. So Rostelecom, please. When we're talking about protecting critical infrastructure, we need to understand two key things and two key differences from our traditional approaches we've developed over years of security provision. First of all, the character of attacks. If we're talking about traditional attacks that we had previously and the ones we had in credit organizations, they look as follows. First, there's investigation. They walk the perimeter, and once the offender gets in, they use simple tools to analyze where they are, what vectors are most efficient, and it might take a month or two. And after that, there's this thrust and attack, and in 3-4 hours the vector is on ABS or IMKB. And this last part of attack is not even hidden because our systems are not able to react this fast, and the goal is not to hide yourself. When we're talking about attacks on critical infrastructure, the goal is different. What is usually pursued by the offender is they need to be present to be able to manage this critical infrastructure. So the attack takes time, and at each stage this attack is hidden. It masks itself. They use a zero-day, undetected toolkits of malware. These malware unusually don't leave traces in file systems, and they have well-developed mechanisms of masking themselves, and they are undetectable, and you don't see if they're in a sandbox or under analysis or they're floating freely. And at each stage, they put as many effort as possible. These attacks are very expensive, they're complex, and they try not to be detected. And the only toolkit that allows us to find these long-term attacks is finding anomalies and profiling systems, looking into something that is different from normal behavior. Secondly, the specific nature of the object we are protecting, an object of critical infrastructure. It might be a system that manages the telecom system or production control system or power control system, and each system has a key function, and the key function embedded in its infrastructure is reliability. and it sets limitations on how we can secure it. So, you can't just put a screen that will block. You can't do that. The price of a mistake, the price of a wrong blocking is critically high. So when we're talking about providing security for critical infrastructure objects, we're talking about three basic things. First, security by design, realizing architecture of the managing system to make it architecturally sustainable. Secondly, it's security through monitoring. When we whatever blocking we're talking about is taken beyond the managing segment. We first need to detect an attack, and once it's a long-term detect, once you have detected it, you have time to block it. And thirdly is something we invest a lot in. We've started to implement in every managing system. We create a trust environment. This is a kind of environment where you cannot introduce another code when you have secure delivery of
компонент системы управления. И, конечно,
of update, and this approach is the only approach we can apply when we need to ensure security for critical infrastructure objects. Well, in your opinion, the characteristics for those who actually pose the threat we're not talking about, your everyday criminals or hooligans. Can you describe who are those behind the attacks on critical infrastructure? Well, first of all, you don't have your darknet hooligans of the past. We're talking about well-structured business with huge budgets, and these budgets can be bigger than the security budgets we have. Civil attacks on normal infrastructure, in general infrastructure, you can't compare the costs. DDoS may cost $100 or $200, and it can be really powerful. When we're talking about a target attack, a persistent threat, and we have this attacking body, we see that a lot of programmers and vendors actually have worked on it. And you can yourself decide on the cost of these attacks. And I don't want to go deeper into who could spend this much money and these budgets to realize those attacks. To fight these attacks, in your opinion, maybe there are new services that will allow us to ensure security. Maybe you offer some services like Bizon, the telecom offers. We're talking about professional attacks. We need some professional security or protection. Well, I don't want to advertise here, but if we're talking seriously in terms of cybersecurity, there's a huge HR deficit to bring together a professional team with star experts in monitoring, in reaction, in forensic and forensic studies. It is very difficult to bring them together. Secondly, providing cybersecurity is not it's only a supporting process for any organization. And it requires a lot of R&D, as any project that demands a lot of R&D, it must be part of the service model. And it is more efficient to have it as services. and to outsource these services, and it will cost 10-20% less than developing it within your own company. What can be outsourced to the provider, what cannot be outsourced to the provider. Managing risks is the task for the organization itself. But technically complex things, routine operations that require certain skills and qualifications like monitoring, reaction to attacks, this can be outsourced easily, and this is the kind of service that can be outsourced. Thank you. Lothar, maybe we'll pass the floor to you. You represent one of the largest vendors, and Cisco companies also owns cloud services and offers its own infrastructure. So you're familiar with the security threats for critical infrastructure. What are the threats you see? And what ways of fighting them you find most promising?
So I found it interesting to hear what I've heard from our colleagues from Saudi. Is that's what we see, and that's what our customers are asking us. Is so how can a company like Cisco help you in an environment that is 20 to 30 years old, but at the same time needs to connect, to get digitized, to be remotely monitored, remotely managed across country. Igor talked about HR shortage. So this is the kind of conversations we have with our customers. So what vendors like us need to do is to come up with a proposal that allows to integrate old systems and to integrate it with modernized, digitized systems. And we heard about analytics and behavior analytics, and that is a key element for us in order to prevent outbreaks in networks to customers. So if you can see that a user behaves differently, that a system behaves differently, that you have an IP range your company is connected with, you don't do business with. These are signs of behaviors that are not normal to your company's normal behavior, where you can act and detect. So the other element is that the attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. So you might use the email as an entry point, but just in order to get into. I always say a slogan: hackers don't break into networks, hackers log into networks. So when you don't, so you need to build also a zero trust model to say, can I trust every person on the network is the person that is supposed to be, or not? How do you have a mechanism in your company to check that? So for vendors like us, it means we need to build and provide systems and offers that allow automation and allow integration between old and new systems and give insights to behaviors. One thing that we also put a lot of emphasis on is that the traffic itself, the IP traffic, gets more and more often encrypted. So how do you treat traffic that is encrypted to see if there are malicious code inside or not? So we had to come up with ideas. So how can we, in light speed, identify malicious behavior in encrypted traffic without de-encrypting it? So there's a lot of things that we're currently putting on. Another element is, as in a vendor, customers expect the products and offers we bring to the market are safe and secure. So we had to think through, when we build and produce products until we ship it to the customer, to make sure that they have not been counterfeited or had been manipulated, so to say, between production and customer installation. And when you reboot a system, that the official software is running and not a software that has been manipulated. So there are a lot of things we are doing in order to make sure that, number one, we can automate, we can increase visibility, we can give faster response, but also ensure our clients that what we provide is secure and trustworthy.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much, Lotta. You mentioned data about traffic that are necessary for providing security. We need to analyze this information. We need to warn you. Do all your customers provide data about traffic? What is the logic of interaction with the customers? Is it just for some selected group of partners? Do you have any specific culture for that?
I think we will. So the benefit is if you can share telemetric data, if you can share threats between customers that use the same products. So we have a mechanism that a customer can opt in or can opt out to share with us. When he opts in, so for example, we see one threat happening in one customer in Germany, where I'm coming from. And if that threat has been detected once and analyzed that this is malicious, in all our customers' systems, that threat will be blocked automatically. So that is an effective cooperation between the customers and the vendor. And that means that the customer needs to see a benefit to do so. He will not give you data or give you insights or share or want to get outside information into the system if it is not secure and if it's not giving value to him. And then what we say is if you're able to see it once and block it once, we can block it everywhere. And that is the trigger point for the customers to open up and share data.
Понятно.
So how many customers do you have that are willingly sharing data with you, percentage-wise?
Это много.
That is a lot. So you have a large array of verified information about the threats, and you can share this information with other customers or with other companies, and maybe also with the centers that monitor threats on the national level. Thank you very much. Mr. Rivashko? National Coordination Center for Computer Incidents, created just over a year ago. Its specific goal is to ensure information exchange among companies and also to tackle issues related to the safety of critical infrastructure. As you know, this is a very important task, and if these processes are disrupted, it might severely impact society and the life of citizens, so we need to make sure it runs smoothly. So, Mr. Rivashko, which threats and risks in the scale of, on the national scale do you see for critical infrastructure, and how can we deal with these threats and risks? Thank you. First, I'd like to say that critical industries in Russia are not limited to representatives at this round table. By law, there are 13 industries in Russia that can have critical information infrastructure. And with that in mind, it is the mega regulation that is key. It is regulated by Law 177, dated 26th July 2017, on the safety of critical information infrastructure. This is a federal law, and it didn't come with much surprise, because it was preceded by very detailed discussion in the professional community, and the principles in the necessity for enacting this act, enacting this law, had been evident for many years prior. We think it significantly impacted the the way we see critical information infrastructure in Russia, where we see it as very significant. The adoption of this law also allowed to make important amendments to the approaches and the processes of ensuring the security of critical infrastructure. And here I wanted to draw your attention to the system of detecting attacks and the system of information exchange about identified malware activities, which allowed to combine the efforts of a lot of stakeholders. Our coordination center is supervising these activities. Presently, this exchange features communities that ensure security of more than 8,000 critical infrastructure facilities across Russia. They receive practical assistance in terms of responding to incidents, and they collect information about new threats. Our center also works on methodology in terms of organizing detection, prevention, and mitigation of computer attacks. This work is in high demand, and this year we've seen that players that within the system exchange information about malicious activities, their own activity has significantly increased. There are also organizations that we work with, and we see that the ability to promptly use information to prevent computer attacks and virus attacks is growing. There's a number of organizations with which we work at a more professional level, let's put it this way. We have 36 agreements, including an agreement with Rostelecom. Speaking about the situation in general, we see changes in attitude to infrastructure. The regulatory basis, and I'm referring to the federal law and a number of other pieces of legislation, they influence the owners of critical infrastructure facilities and developers of defense methods and mechanisms. They also influence the training of qualified specialists and developing training and educational standards. As to the most significant factor in the last year, we've seen a shift in focus of attention onto prevention of computer attacks and incidents. In which industry do you see the greater number of problems? This law is based on two pillars: defense and prompt response. And in terms of defense, we see the greatest activity in the fuel industry and healthcare. As to the response part, here we have telecommunications and a number of facilities which really need to be protected. Thank you. The context of threats knows no boundaries. It's transnational, and clearly it requires international cooperation. What do you see in terms of achievements and plans? This is something that is obvious to all of us. the transnational nature of threats, and effective protection, effective response can only be built on cooperation. International cooperation is something that we really focus on. These days, we've been working on it with 122 countries. Since the beginning of this year, we've had requests from foreign countries, which resulted in eliminating about 2,000 threats in our infrastructure. About 2,500 entities, foreign entities, attempted to eliminate threats in our infrastructure. This area is something that we clearly need to keep working on. Other elements are education and reliable partnership. Reliable partnership is key. Thank you. Partnership, trust, cooperation, one of the key points in our discussion, far from technical details, even though we're speaking about defense and protection. The format of partnership, of cooperation on the international level. And this is my question to all the panelists. What other areas of cooperation do you see? What can be done in the next year so that by the next Cyber Congress we could say, yes, this is something that we've done? What are your ideas? Anyone? Yusuf, please.
Yeah, I think this is a very important question. This morning we have seen or we've heard a lot of talk about the need for legislation at United Nations, ITU, and I want to take this a little bit to lower level. And let's talk about the industry and how we managed within our hands. I believe that knowledge transfer or knowledge sharing and collaboration must start with trust. No one will share information with you if this organization is afraid that it will cause reputational damage, economic damage. But I'm sure within your circles there are probably few partners who as important to you as you are important to them. Start with them. Start with your local partners and suppliers. And as you build the trust, this will grow and hopefully will reach to international. We've heard today that we talk about cybersecurity and knowledge sharing, and then we go home and nothing happens. I think that's going to continue unless we take it in our hand as the in charge of enterprises who cares about cybersecurity to take it further. There is international collaboration, and we are hoping that we'll see it as an anchor. The WEF, W Economic Forum, have started the Center for Cybersecurity, and they have the aim to bring international bodies together, and we are really looking forward to see the results of this one. What we need, I think, from an international level is a body who can be trusted to open the box for them. This morning we have heard also a mandate or a call to say, open your software, or give me open source, give me your product to check it out. Probably this is not going to happen between vendors and customers. But I think if we have a body internationally trusted that can test your software, give you a certification index and say vendor A is 90% certified or free of bugs or free of backdoors, while vendor C is 20, that's, you do the math. Today in the control system, for example, and from safety, there's an index. Which product can go into the plant, which product cannot. So I think similar to this would definitely help the community to ensure that what they deploy in their critical infrastructure is cybersecurity sounds, I would call it, similar to safety sounds.
Спасибо большое, Юзеф, за развернутый такой ответ.
Thank you, Yusuf, for your answer. Are there any ideas, maybe, for such a body under UN, under WEF, under WEF, or any OECD?
I think it's challenging on the global level to get the trust immediately, specific between nations or specifically between competing companies in the same sector. So I think a good idea is to start on your sector in your area, right? Whether it's in your region, whether it's in your state, in your nation, and to build that. And then enlarge the cooperation with other states, other nations where you think that there's the trust level. And when others will join, when they see the benefit of being part of this. So I think to build the trust in a lower level will speed up the process. If we wait for a large organization or large global respected, whether it's the World Economic Forum or the UN, it will take maybe 10 years until we'll get there. So start where you have the influence, and with what we have seen is as soon as we share between customers the threats and they see the benefit of being immediately protected, that's where they see the benefit and build trust to each other.
Спасибо, Лорен.
Thank you. Thank you, Lothar. Anybody wants to add? In my opinion, informational interaction and cooperation is a key to our response to cyber attacks. Well, and there are several level exchanging information about critical threats, about 0 days, and this is where we do technical informational exchange about attacks within the country, and it is also interaction with other security operations centers with national structures, and fortunately the speed of this information exchange when we discover a 0-day or a new attack, it takes not even days or hours, but tens of minutes. And it's cool. Technical exchange on the international level is, of course, done through the National Coordination Center. Another platform for our interaction is knowledge exchange. We've heard about experience exchange, but today it is such a fast-growing area that nobody has right answers. You only get right answers in cooperation, in professional communities where we can openly discuss good approaches, best approaches, and possible solutions of the challenges that the world offers us. And to conclude, I would wish you all use this platform and other cybersecurity conferences as a means to establish professional contacts with similar experts in other countries and within the country, so both on the national and international level. Thank you, Igor. Any kind of trust between countries, between organizations, starts with the trust between people. As soon as you have it, it starts working, and it begins with communication, the kind of communication you're witnessing here now, communication within the professional community. And I think we have a great opportunity to build this trust, to start building this trust on the platform of the Cyber Congress and work on it, enhancing this trust. And I'm really grateful to all panelists and to all participants of today's discussion. Let us protect the world from cyber threats. Thank you.